My name is Olivia Miller, and I'm 41 years old. The day I found out my stepfather had been depositing my late father's life insurance checks into a private account for 11 years, I was standing in a storage unit in Tucson holding a cardboard box full of bank statements I was never supposed to find. The box smelled like mildew and dust and old paper. It was labeled Tax Misc 2009. I'd been helping my mother sort through a unit she'd stopped paying attention to after she remarried, and she'd stepped out to take a phone call from my stepbrother when my fingers found the rubber-banded stack of envelopes near the bottom. They were addressed to me. All of them. Every one. My name, my father's name, a policy number from Midwestern Mutual Life. And all of them opened. I didn't say a word when my mother came back inside. I tucked the box under my arm, told her I was going to load it in my truck, and spent 40 minutes sitting in the parking lot reading every single document. The policy had been worth $312,000. I had never seen a cent of it. Before I go any further, let me ask you something real quick. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted, someone who was supposed to protect you, had been quietly helping themselves to what was yours? Not all at once. Just a little at a time. For years and years, until the number became impossible to look at? And if you've ever been treated like a child who was too young to notice or too grateful to question, hit like and subscribe, because I built this channel for exactly that kind of person. I'm not going to tell you this story was easy to live through, but I will tell you it ends with a paper trail so clean it practically filed itself. Let's go back to the beginning. My father, Raymond Miller, died when I was 16 years old. Pancreatic cancer. It moved fast, 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end. He was a high school shop teacher in Flagstaff, Arizona, the kind of man who fixed his own truck, kept his word, and took me fishing every September without fail. He wasn't wealthy. He wasn't powerful. But he was careful, and he'd spent years building a life insurance policy precisely because he understood that one day he would not be there. He told me about it himself, 2 weeks before he died, when it was just the two of us in his hospital room and he was having a good afternoon. There's a policy, he said. $312,000. It goes to your mother as trustee. But it's for you, Olivia. For college. For a house someday. For a start. I was 16. I didn't really understand what $312,000 meant. I understood it was a lot. I understood he was being careful with it. I said, "Okay, Dad." He said, "You'll be all right. You're a Miller. We figure things out." He died on a Thursday. I went back to school the following Monday because I didn't know what else to do with myself. My mother, Carol, was 43 at the time. She was not a bad woman. I want to be clear about that because what I'm about to tell you is complicated, and complicated things deserve precision. She loved my father. She grieved him. But she was also afraid of money, of being alone, of the endless, grinding responsibility of raising a teenager on a teacher's salary that had just disappeared. She met Dennis Farwell 18 months later at a grief support group at a church in Scottsdale. Dennis was 50, recently divorced, and the owner of a mid-size flooring installation business. He wore pressed shirts and said the right things and had a son named Patrick from his first marriage. Within a year, he and Carol were engaged. Within 2, they were married, and Dennis had moved into the house my father had paid off. I was 18 by then. I'd just graduated. I asked my mother about the life insurance money, not demanding, just asking, because I was supposed to be starting college in the fall and I'd been waiting to hear about it. "Dennis is helping us manage the finances now," she said. "He's very good with money. It's in an account. When you're older, we'll talk about it." That was the first time I heard those words. When you're older. I would hear them 5 more times over the next decade. I went to college on loans. I took out $57,000 in federal and private debt to attend Arizona State, where I studied civil engineering. I graduated at 22 and spent the next several years paying it down while working for an engineering firm in Phoenix. I never stopped believing the insurance money was there, in some account, waiting. I never stopped assuming that when the time was right, my mother would bring it up. She never did. Dennis, meanwhile, had a talent for money specifically, for knowing when other people's money was nearby and making sure it drifted in his direction. His flooring business was successful. He drove a Lexus. He and Carol took 2 international vacations a year. Patrick, my stepbrother, had gotten his college paid for without loans, had received a down payment on a house in Scottsdale at 26, and had recently been brought into the flooring business as a co-owner. None of this had struck me as extraordinary until the storage unit. I'm an engineer. The way I process things is linear and methodical. I don't spiral. I don't react. When I found that box, I didn't cry, I didn't call Dennis and start screaming. What I did was make a list. What I knew. The policy existed. My name was on it. Someone had opened the correspondence. The checks had gone somewhere. I had not received them. What I needed to know. Where did the money go? Who authorized the transfers? Was there a trust document? What did my mother know? I drove home from Tucson without mentioning the box to my mother. I told her I'd found a bunch of old financial stuff and I'd take care of it. She said that was fine. She looked relieved, actually, the way people do when an unpleasant task gets taken off their plate. The next morning, I called the policy number on one of the envelopes. Midwestern Mutual Life was now part of a larger insurance conglomerate, but their records division could still access documents from that period. I gave them my father's policy number, my social security number, and my relationship to the insured. After 3 transfers and a 20-minute hold, a records specialist came back on the line. I can confirm a policy in that number, she said carefully. The death benefit was paid in full in 2 separate disbursements in 2003. The pay of record is listed as a trust account. What trust? The Miller Family Education and Welfare Trust. Account established in March 2003. Who are the trustees on that account? A pause. I'm only able to confirm one trustee by name. Carol Farwell, formerly Carol Miller. I wrote down every word. I thanked her. I hung up. Then I called an estate attorney in Phoenix named Margaret Yee, whose name I'd gotten from a colleague at work who'd used her to sort out a property dispute. I told her I needed a consultation. She had an opening the following Tuesday. I spent the 5 days between that phone call and the appointment doing what I did best, gathering data. I filed public records requests with the Arizona Department of Revenue for any trust documents registered in my father's name. I ordered copies of my father's probate records from the Coconino County Superior Court, public documents, available to anyone who asks. I pulled my own credit history to verify that no accounts had been opened in my name that I didn't recognize. And I called my uncle Curtis. Curtis Miller was my father's younger brother, a retired postal worker in Flagstaff who had attended the funeral, helped my mother with the estate paperwork in those first months, and then quietly faded from our lives after Dennis arrived. I hadn't spoken to him in years. Olivia, he said when he recognized my voice. Good Lord. It's been too long. Uncle Curtis. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. He was quiet for a beat. All right. Do you know anything about what happened to my dad's life insurance? Another pause. Longer. I wondered when you'd ask, he said finally. Curtis told me that he had been present when my father's estate was processed. He had assumed, correctly, that the insurance money was going into a trust for me. He had never asked what happened to it because it wasn't his business and because in the early years he'd trusted Carol. But about 4 years after my father died, he'd been visiting Flagstaff and had lunch with my mother, and she'd made a comment that stuck with him. She'd said, Dennis thinks we should consolidate the accounts eventually. Just simplify things. Curtis hadn't known what to make of it then. He hadn't pressed. But it had sat in the back of his mind. Did you ever see any trust documents? I asked him. Anything with my name on it? No, he said. I never did. I should have asked. I'm sorry, Olivia. I should have paid more attention. It's not your fault. But if I need you to give a statement at some point, would you do that? Whatever you need, he said. Whatever you need. Margaret E. had an office on the 18th floor of a glass building near downtown Phoenix, and she had the kind of precise, unhurried manner that comes from decades of seeing exactly what people do to each other when money is involved. I laid everything on her desk. The bank statement envelopes. The insurance records I'd obtained. The probate documents. Curtis's account of the lunch comment. She read through everything without rushing. Tell me what you already understand about what happened, she said. I think Dennis Farwell redirected the trust funds. My mother was the trustee. She may or may not have known what she was signing. The money was supposed to be held for my education and welfare. Instead, someone spent it. That's a reasonable working theory. The question is documentation. She tapped the probate records. The trust was registered. That means there should be trust accounting somewhere. Annual filings at minimum, showing the account balance and any disbursements. If those filings were never made, that's a separate violation. If they were made and the disbursements went to parties other than you, that's evidence of breach of fiduciary duty and potentially much more, depending on who authorized those distributions. Is there a statute of limitations issue? She looked at me. Possibly. But discovery rules often toll the statute from the date the beneficiary could reasonably have discovered the harm. Given that you had no access to these documents until now, and given that you were a minor when the trust was established, there may be an argument for a later discovery date. I'll need to research the specific facts. She folded her hands. Before we go further, do you want to pursue this civilly, criminally, or both? What would you recommend? Gather more. Come back when you have the trust's actual account records. Those will tell us everything. Getting the trust's actual account records took 4 months. I won't walk through every step. Some of it involved legal process. Some involved my mother's cooperation once I finally told her what I'd found. And some of it came from a forensic accountant named Douglas Teal that Margaret retained to reconstruct the paper trail. My mother's reaction when I sat down with her and showed her what I'd uncovered is the part of this story I find hardest to describe. She didn't deny it immediately. She went very pale and very still, and then she said, "Olivia, I need to call Dennis." "That's not why I'm here," I said. "I need you to tell me what you knew." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "He told me it was being reinvested. That the trust was being restructured for better returns. He showed me documents. I signed things. I wasn't always sure I understood what I was signing, but he told me it was for you." "Was it for me?" She didn't answer. Her hands were in her lap. She was looking at the table. "Was it for me, Mom?" "I don't know," she said. "I didn't ask enough questions. I thought he knew what he was doing. I thought it was taken care of." I believed her. Not completely, and not without grief, because there's a particular kind of hurt that comes from learning someone let your inheritance disappear without fighting for it. But I believed that she hadn't orchestrated it. She had allowed it. And allowing it was its own kind of damage, but it was different from driving it. Dennis had driven it. Douglas Teal reconstructed the full account history over a period of 12 weeks. What he found, the trust had received the full insurance payout of $312,000 in 2003. Between 2004 and 2011, the funds had been disbursed in 23 separate transactions. The recipients were Dennis Farwell personally, an LLC registered in his name, the Farwell Flooring Business, and Patrick Farwell. A total of $287,000. The remaining $25,000 had sat in the dormant trust account, apparently forgotten. None of the disbursements had been for my education, my welfare, or anything that could be reasonably connected to the trust's stated purpose. Not 1 cent. I want to explain something about this period because it's easy to summarize and hard to live through. Between finding the box in the storage unit and the morning we finally had the full accounting, about 7 months passed. During those 7 months, I went to work every day. I reviewed utility plans. I attended site meetings. I filed the required forms and made the required calls. From the outside, my life looked completely ordinary. On the inside, I was building a case. I didn't confront Dennis. I didn't call Patrick. I didn't mention any of it to anyone outside of Margaret's office and 1 phone call to Curtis. I'd learned something from watching what happens when people get emotional in disputes. They tip their hand. They give the other side time to prepare. They make themselves look unstable instead of credible. I wanted to be credible. When Douglas finished the forensic accounting report, Margaret reviewed it and said, "This is as clean a paper trail as I've seen on a case like this." He was not careful. He thought I'd never look, I said. They usually do. She filed a civil complaint in Maricopa County Superior Court on a Thursday morning. The causes of action were breach of fiduciary duty, conversion, fraudulent transfer, and unjust enrichment. The defendants were Dennis Farwell and the LLC. My mother was not named. She had agreed to cooperate fully with the case in exchange for being treated as a witness rather than a party. Dennis received service of process on a Friday afternoon. According to the process server's notes, he answered the door himself and stood there reading the complaint for about 2 minutes before going inside without a word. The following Monday, I received a text from Patrick. "Olivia, I need to talk to you. Please." I didn't respond. My attorney had advised against direct communication, and I followed her advice. What happened next unfolded over 9 months of litigation. I'll give you the shape of it without the procedural detail, because the procedural detail is interesting to me and probably not to you. Dennis's initial response was denial. His attorney filed a general denial and a counterclaim alleging that the trust disbursements had been made with Carol's full knowledge and consent, and that as a duly authorized trustee, she had the right to make those transfers. This was technically creative, but factually catastrophic, because Douglas Teal had already reconstructed the precise sequence of documents. Several of the authorizing signatures on the disbursement requests were dated on days when my mother, according to her calendar records and phone records, was out of state. 2 were dated on a weekend she was documented to have spent at a family wedding in New Mexico. I also had something Dennis hadn't anticipated: a witness. His former bookkeeper, a woman named Sandra Ellison who had left the flooring business 5 years earlier on unfriendly terms, had kept copies of the internal records that showed the trust funds moving into the business's operating accounts. She hadn't known at the time exactly what the money was. She'd known it was irregular. She'd flagged it internally. Dennis had told her it was a family loan. She agreed to give a deposition. In the deposition, she laid out the transaction records with the precision of someone who had spent 20 years managing other people's money and found mismanagement personally offensive. She was not angry. She was not dramatic. She simply said what she had seen, and what she had seen was enough. Dennis settled 2 months later. The settlement amount is confidential, but I can tell you that it was not small, and that it included the recovery of a sum that allowed me to pay off the remaining student loans I'd been carrying for 15 years and purchase a house. His flooring business was sold shortly afterward. The LLC was dissolved. Patrick, who had received a portion of the diverted funds to purchase his Scottsdale house, was not a named party in the litigation, but he and I have not spoken since the complaint was filed, and I don't expect that to change. The hardest conversation was not with Dennis's attorney. It was not with the judge. It was not even with Douglas Teal, going line by line through a spreadsheet that itemized what I should have had. The hardest conversation was with my mother, in her kitchen in Scottsdale, 2 weeks after the settlement. Dennis had moved out of the house by then. They had separated, quietly, without the drama I might have expected. She made coffee. We sat at her kitchen table. She looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before, not the ordinary tiredness of age, but something deeper, like a weight that had been there a long time and had only recently become visible. "I should have looked harder," she said. "I should have asked. You were my responsibility. Your father trusted me to take care of it, and I let someone tell me it was handled, and I believed him because it was easier." "I know," I said. "Are you going to be able to forgive me?" I thought about that question for a while before I answered. "I don't know yet. I think I will. I'm not there yet." She nodded. She looked at her coffee. "He was convincing," she said. "He knew exactly what to say and when to say it. I think he started before we even got married. I think he saw the trust and calculated what he could do." "I think you're right. I'm so sorry, Olivia. I know that doesn't fix anything." "It helps," I said. "It helps a little. We've been rebuilding since then. It's slow. There are phone calls now and occasional dinners and a careful attention on both sides to saying what we mean rather than what's comfortable. I'm not sure what we'll be to each other eventually, but we're not nothing. That matters. I'm going to tell you what I learned from this, not because I think I have the whole thing figured out, but because some of you watching this are in the middle of something similar. You felt the wrongness for a long time and you didn't know what to do about it. You were told you were imagining things or being difficult or that it wasn't your place to ask questions. Here's what I know. Documents don't lie. Bank statements don't have feelings. Transaction records don't get defensive or change their story based on who's in the room. When you're dealing with someone who is very good at shaping narratives, the antidote is paper. Not arguments. Not confrontations. Not appeals to fairness. Paper. The second thing, moving carefully is not the same as moving weakly. Every month I spent gathering records before Dennis knew I was looking was a month he couldn't prepare, couldn't disappear anything, couldn't build a counter-narrative. Patience is not passivity. Patience is strategy. The third thing, and the one that still costs me something to say out loud, not everyone who wrongs you intended to. My mother failed me. She failed me significantly, and for a long time, and the consequences were real. But she didn't fail me out of malice. She failed me out of the particular blindness that comes from grief and insecurity and trusting the wrong person. I can hold both of those things at once, the genuine damage and the genuine absence of intent. That's harder than being angry, but it's more accurate. My father left me something. It took me 25 years to collect it. When I stood in that house I bought, a 3-bedroom in Northeast Phoenix, with a yard and good light in the afternoons, I thought about him. About the fishing trips. About the hospital room and the afternoon when he told me I'd be all right. He was right. I am all right. It took longer than it should have, and the road had more damage in it than he would have wanted. But the Millers figure things out. He told me that, too. If you've made it to the end of this, thank you. This story is not easy to tell, and it's not easy to hear. If something in it matched something in your own life, leave a comment. You don't have to share details. Just let me know you're out there. That part always matters. And if you want more stories like this one, like and subscribe for new videos. Take care of the people around you. Pay attention. Keep your paperwork.